Now he's using his growth assets to support this RV trip around the country. So the growth bucket is something that it's like a flex. It's like having the wild card in Uno, right? Or whatever that card was. Was
Yeah.
that the wild
Yeah.
card? So like you can do whatever you want now,
Right.
because you have it. That's what it's for. The third
And
bucket,
it's, just defining that's that freedom, right? The freedom to
yeah,
make a choice. Yeah.
yeah. So that's really what it's about. And so then there's a third bucket. The third bucket's liquidity, right? You should have sufficient liquidity, just a small little savings pot that's not necessarily invested in risky assets. It could be a savings account, it could be a bank CD, it could be a money market account, it could even be a fixed annuity of some sort. But you should have liquidity, um, so that if you need a few $1,000, you don't have to tap into any investments to get it. You just have this little pot of money. Generally, that liquidity bucket is going to cover anywhere from 6 to 12 months of living expenses. So, if you have a $5,000 a month living expense, you might have 60K at most sitting in the savings account, right? Then the
Mhm.
last but not least is the fourth bucket, and that's your legacy slash long term care. Legacy slash long term care. And if you think of like a visualization of like how one bucket runs over and fills the next bucket, runs over, fills the next bucket, so on and so forth. That's the optimization. Your income bucket, once it's filled up, it's going to run over, and now your growth bucket just starts filling, right? Think of that visualization. The growth bucket just starts filling up. And then because you don't need to touch it very often, that growth bucket fills up. Your liquidity bucket's already filled, should already be filled for the most part, but you can add more in there if you want. But last but not least, if all of those prior buckets are full and doing what they should be doing, again, giving it intended purpose and telling your money what to do, that legacy bucket overflows. And if you do have a need for long term care and you unfortunately didn't have a plan that you had in place to secure traditional long term care insurance, there are some annuities out there that can give you an enhanced income benefit for long term care. But ultimately, that growth asset bucket can be part of your long term care bucket as well. Again, it runs over and fills. But if you never have a need for long term care, it's just a legacy bucket, and that passes on to your heirs or to a charity of your choice. But that's where the optimization comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's just the ability to segment your money, have its defined purpose for it. Um, the last one I want to hit on here, just in how to avoid falling into that emotional trap, is to work with somebody who does not have the emotional decision in making that you're making yourself, right? So whether that's speaking with a fiduciary, an independent advisor, somebody you can come to and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I've got going on. I need to bounce some ideas off of you in an objective manner. Um, you know, Obviously I'm biased because this is my money, so I need another opinion. And I've had those conversations where maybe we find out that an annuity is not a right fit, but at least they've had the ability to talk to somebody and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, does this fit within my planning?
Yeah, that's really key, is to talk to somebody that has objectivity, when you're emotional in that decision, and that they can truly give you sound advice and try to remove the emotion out of it and support it with factual data and sound planning. So, and that ties back here to this point, and that's just remember, the best plan is the one that you'll actually stick to.
Mm-hmm.
A boring plan that works beats a fancy one that fails. Having an income annuity is kind of boring when
Yeah.
you really think about it.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, income is king, and a fancy plan would be trying to manage all of these things that go into a retirement plan, but using the markets or one tool. That's fancy, right? Because you got all these moving parts and things, and a lot of the uncontrollables are prevalent and that you have no say over. So um, a fancy one that fails is ultimately just that. It's a failure. I like the boring plan. I like the tried and true. I like the slow and steady. Again, remember the tortoise versus the hare, the
Yep.
tortoise and the hare. The tortoise won.
Yeah, I was just going to say the reason why that plan is boring is because your end goal is consistency,
Absolutely.
right? So, it's funny because I was watching basketball last night. Example that Charles Barkley, of all people, gave was, you've got one, the difference between a great player and an inconsistent player is they may both average 20 points a night, but your inconsistent player is going to average seven or is going to get 7 points one night and they're going to get 33 points the next night. Well, he just averaged 20 points. But in the long term, that's not going to win you the games. You need somebody who's consistently doing the job. And I think that's, as we talk about retirement planning, consistently over time, having that plan and consistently working with it day in and day out so that there's no surprises that creep up.
Man, that's such a huge analogy right there, man. I love that. That really ties in like kind of like sequence of returns risk, right? You
Yep.
know, everybody says, "Oh, the S&P's averaged 7.5% since 1957." Okay, great. But yeah, there were years where it went up 30% and it dropped 25 the next.